Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. So INR has been falling in comparison to US dollar, and this is going to have massive impact on you in case you want to study abroad, in case you are saving money in INR, in case you are going for a vacation outside India. Even if you think that, you know what, मुझे विदेश से क्या लेना देना, how does like USD impacts me? Well, it impacts you a lot. The reason is that India is a net importer of goods. Now on this video, I'm going to help you understand 10 critical impacts that a fall of INR is going to have. The repercussions are serious. I'll streamline, I will simplify the entire topic so that even if you're a class 8th, 9th student, you will be able to follow everything along. Now, most of us are worried about this fall in INR, and one simple step that can help you address this issue is that you can invest your money in outside markets, for example, the US market by buying US stocks. How to do that? Well, there is a very simple platform called as Vested. You can go and check out how this platform exactly works. They have presented a lot of data. You can use data to analyze different stocks, good quality stocks like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, and take bets accordingly. In case you are interested, there is a special link which is given in the description and comment box. It would help you avail certain discounts. So definitely go and check it out. And with that said, let's move over to the main video. Point number one that you need to understand is why does the INR fall? अब कुछ बोलेंगे कि you know what, politics चलती रहती है इस चीज़ पे, but what is the actual understanding behind it? Well, for that you need to go back to the very basic concept of supply and demand, and this is how a supply and demand curve is plotted in terms of economics. See, basically price of anything is determined by where the supply curve, this upward sloping curve is called a supply curve, and downward sloping curve is called as demand curve. Wherever these two things intersect, that becomes the price of that particular commodity. Now this applies to anything in the world, including INR, including US dollar, including this pen, including Apple laptop or whatever it is. Now a more insightful point to know here is that, see, whenever the supply of any commodity or anything increases, but the demand does not grow proportionally, this is the important word, proportionally, that if supply is increasing by 100 units and demand is only increasing by 50 units, then what will happen to supply curve? Well, it will shift this way, right? It will shift rightwards. And as a result, this becomes your intersection point, this P2, and the price of that particular thing falls. This is the basic point that you need to understand, that things go down in value or the price goes down in value when the supply is there, but the demand hasn't grown proportionally. This is the central point. Now, why am I telling you this basic fact? Because if you go back to 2020, then US government printed crazy amount of money. Indian government printed crazy amount of money. US government printed more money supply compared to the Indian government, and Indian government steps were lauded. They were said that, you know what, Indian government has done exceptional job, vagera vagera. But see, more refined point that you need to understand it, that see, when the US government in 2021, they printed roughly 20% of their money supply that existed before 2020. Okay, so this was like very large sums of money that was printed. So supply went up like crazy. But did the demand for USD fall, or did the demand for USD struggled? No, not at all, because US dollar is still the apex currency in the world. Whenever there is risk in the world, whenever there is any kind of trouble in the world, then people or big ticket investors, they actually end up depositing most of their money in US oriented assets or investments. India did not increase its supply of money like crazy, but were other investors demanding INR कि नहीं यार हम तो US dollar छोड़ के चले जाएंगे and we are going to buy only INR? No, that was not happening, and therefore since 2020 Indian rupee has been losing value at a crazy rate, and this is going to have massive impact on you. Number one impact I can tell you through my own personal story, which is about me going to INSEAD in 2014. So when I went to INSEAD, this was what the dollar rates were, that one US dollar was equivalent to 60 rupees, right? And now after 10 years, the same US dollar is approximately around 84 rupees. So there has been roughly a 35-40% drop in INR. Now what does that mean in de facto terms? So de facto terms, इसका मतलब ये निकल के आता है कि if you are consuming any goods in foreign countries, then it will have significant cost for you. So for example, if I were to, let's say INSEAD की फीस 2014 में 1 CR थी, and INSEAD is one of the top schools in the world, उसकी फीस बहुत होती है. I went on a scholarship, so I was lucky there. But if I were to go to INSEAD and pay this same 1 crore fee, then in INR terms will this be 1 crore? No, it will be roughly 1.4 CR. On top of that, there is general inflation in the world. It's not as if कि INSEAD अपनी फीस fixed रखेगा. Every year it increases its fees, so इसकी फीस बहुत हो जाएगी. Okay, but because of currency depreciation, which means INR falling, I have to pay 40% more amount just because of this devaluation of currency. If you are going and consuming anything outside India, कि चाहे आप थाईलैंड की ट्रिप कर लो, चाहे आप दुबई की ट्रिप कर लो, चाहे आप फॉरेन घूमने निकल जाओ, चाहे आप रेमिट कर लो पैसा इंडिया से बाहर, so there is a higher cost for you. So this is literally point number 1. Number 2 point, and this is something that we don't understand, which is that it drives foreign wealth away. Whenever the currency depreciates, foreign investors, for example, if you have a rich person, let's say Jeff Bezos, and he is considering investing in India, he might not want to invest in India. Why? And this is like counterintuitive, because आपको लगेगा कि यार चीज़ें सस्ती हो गई इंडिया में. Then why is it a foreign investor like Jeff Bezos not investing in India? तो उसके लिए आपको समझना पड़ेगा the concept of asset devaluation. So let's say that this is the year 2024, okay, and Jeff Bezos has like $10 billion lying around under his mattress, and he decides कि चलो यार इंडिया में इन्वेस्ट कर देते हैं, स्टॉक मार्केट में मोदी ने बोल रखा है कि स्टॉक बढ़ जाएंगे and all that stuff, so I'll go and invest. Okay, great. So that's an Indian asset that you have purchased. Okay, now he has purchased what? He has purchased $10 billion of USD at 84 rupees a dollar. Okay, now what happens then? Now it is 2035. So 10 साल के लिए पैसा लगा के छोड़ दिया, long term investor, ostrich investor, this that stuff, SIP कर दी, right, whatever. So now INR becomes what? 100 rupees, and this becomes let's say $15 billion. आपको लगेगा कि इसका तो यार 50% फायदा हो गया है, right, because this was $10 billion and this is $15 billion. But आपको ये भी देखना पड़ेगा कि see, the value or the currency here has changed, right? So here he will be getting less of it, right? So this is the problem, that when he repatriates this money, then it becomes a problem for him because he's considered about his dollar returns. So as a result, foreign investors become a little bit iffy if they feel कि यार इस country की currency गिरती चली जाएगी, and therefore we are seeing a mass exodus. Exodus means that a lot of FIIs are pulling money out of the Indian market precisely because of this reason. Now then comes point number 3, which is that a falling INR discourages imports. Now India is a high consumption economy. High consumption क्यों? क्योंकि हमारी 1.4 billion population है. Okay, we require a lot of stuff. Now what stuff? भाई बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं. Energy हो गया, petrol हो गया, this that stuff. So now is India producing everything on its own? The short answer is no. Now how do we meet that? For example, मान के चलो कि if we have like 100 units of energy demand, now we are only producing let's say 20 units. Where is the rest 80 units coming from? Well, it is coming from imports. Imports मतलब that we are getting that 80 units of deficit oil from some other country. Now if the INR keeps on falling like this, okay, so every month you are getting a higher bill because अभी आपने 85 rupees पे खरीदा, कल को गिर के एक महीने बाद 90 rupees हो गया INR. Then you have to pay higher amount of money to get that same unit of petrol. So this becomes a problem that since India is a net importer of goods, our total bill keeps on going up every time the currency depreciates. So as a result क्या होता है? तो as a result इसका ये निकल के आता है कि the government decides कि ना चलो कम करते हैं, right? I mean let's stay within our limits and let's not try to get more stuff into India from that angle because our import bill will be much higher. So it becomes a problem from that angle that the supply of goods becomes limited. So this is point number 3. Next point comes that now you might turn around and say कि अच्छा चलो अच्छा ही है, right? I mean बाहर से विदेश से माल नहीं आ रहा है, स्वाभिमानिक इंडिया and make in India वगैरह वगैरह अपन करेंगे. See, it even raises our production cost. For example, Indians are consuming a lot of foreign material. For example, जैसे iPhone है, right? आप कंज्यूम करते हो? बिल्कुल करते हो. मैकडोनल्ड्स के बर्गर्स हैं. Are you consuming it? Yes. Domino's pizza है, right? Instagram, tech. Are you consuming that? Yes. What is it, right? Basically इसमें there are certain elements of production. For example, जैसे iPhone की assembly का मैं पढ़ रहा था, तो it takes like approximately like 1600 components that goes into iPhone. Okay, उसमें से कुछ चीज़ें इंडिया में भी बन जाएंगी, उसमें आपको कुछ चीज़ें import करनी पड़ेंगी and all that stuff. So even to make these final products in India, because we are importing a lot of these components, right, to create the entire supply chain, even our production cost goes up. On top of that, यहाँ पे आपको ये imagine करना पड़ेगा कि For example, if the value of INR has depreciated by roughly 30% in the last 5 years, then what do you think wages will be? Well, it should also rise, or at least there will be demand of wages or increase in wages by domestic workers. So all this factors into the production cost. So even production gets hit in India if INR is depreciating. So which brings us to the next point कि अच्छा INR अगर गिर गया तो फिर मेरी सैलरी बढ़नी चाहिए? Yes and no, because this depends on the nature of the work that is there in India. For example, if you study the unit economics of different types of jobs in India, basically you can segregate that in this type of a segment. So for example, India में most of the jobs will not be here, right, which are paying like top 1% salaries in the world. We will have like bottom heavy jobs, okay? So bottom 50% jobs जो होंगे वो इंडिया में होंगे. इसका एक प्राइम एग्जांपल निकल के आता है कि फॉर एग्जांपल जैसे डिलीवरी बॉयज की जो नौकरी होती है, आज से 10 years ago also they used to, or people used to pay somewhere around let's say 10 to 15,000. This is where majority of the delivery agents used to make money, okay? वो अलग फॉर्म में होंगे. फॉर एग्जाम्पल जैसे पार्सल डिलीवरी हो गया, ऑल दैट स्टफ. जोमेटो स्विगी नहीं होगा. अब जोमेटो स्विगी में चले गए, राइट, आफ्टर 10 years. नाउ हाउ मच डू यू थिंक दे आर गेटिंग? वेल, दे आर स्टिल गेटिंग 10 to 15,000 approximately. So here the wages have not increased like crazy. Why? Again, because of that supply demand equation. There is so much supply of people who want to do these jobs. It's not as if that companies increase the wages proportionally in respect to devaluation of currency. होना ये चाहिए कि अगर if the currency is going down by 10% a year, then your wages should rise by 10% a year to offset for that depreciation of currency. In a country like India, because there is so much supply of labor, right, and cheap labor, ये Instamart and all this 5-minute delivery, 10-minute delivery, दुनिया में कहीं नहीं होती, only in India. Why? The simple answer there is cheap labor. Okay, the moment India's cheap labor vanishes, which is unlikely to happen, all these business models will fail. Okay, that is the prime reason that India has very high population density and there is free availability of cheap labor, so to say, which has a very high replacement rate. कि यार नहीं आ रहे delivery boys, right, भगा दो उन्हें. कोई इनफॉर्मल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स होते हैं, लेबर लॉज आर वीक, ऑल दैट स्टफ. सो एज अ रिजल्ट, टू कट द लॉन्ग स्टोरी शॉर्ट, it's not as if that India's wages are getting proportionately adjusted compared to fall in INR. होना ये चाहिए कि corporate should raise your salary by 10% a year, but let me know in the comment box if that is actually happening with you, that are you getting a 10% raise every year, right, in the last 3 years. I highly doubt it. So the sixth point is that because you are not making higher salaries, you now have to depend on your savings or investments in order to protect your wealth. But due to INR depreciation, even this wealth gets deteriorated really fast. So let's say that you have 50 lakh rupees as savings which you have worked for in the last 20 odd years and you have saved 50 lakhs in INR. And if every year the currency gets depreciated by 5%, then the value or the buying power of this 50 lakhs keep on going down. So this becomes a very important point for you to consider, that even the money that you have saved or the investments that you have saved, it kind of depreciates. Now this is applicable be it in the form of like stocks, or be it in the form of bonds, be it in the form of real estate, be it in the form of any such things. So what is the counter to this? Well, the counter to this is that, for example, usually when the INR is depreciating, right, then the upside to that is that, see, it becomes cheaper to buy assets in India. For example, a house which was worth, let's say, 1 crore in INR terms, now if it has only gone up to, let's say, 1.02 crores by the next year, but INR has depreciated by 5%, then ho kya raha hai? De facto, this house is getting cheaper. Then what should happen? Well, the demand for this house should increase. By whom exactly? Well, by international buyers. So therefore, the price also should appreciate. So in case you are in asset classes which are growing faster than the currency depreciation, it is completely okay. But in case you are stuck in assets which are low growth generating assets and INR is depreciating fast, it can really erode your wealth. Therefore, I have been advocating कि भाई आप EPF के चक्कर में बहुत ज़्यादा मत पड़ो. 8% आपका रिटर्न है, ओनली 8% और बिटवीन 8-8.5%, राइट. अब वो आफ्टर टैक्स हो गया, ये वो चीज़ें बहुत बढ़िया चीज़ है. लेकिन फॉर यू व्हाट इज़ द इन्फ्लेशन? वेल, द इन्फ्लेशन इटसेल्फ इज अराउंड लाइक 10% एट लीस्ट, सेगमेंटल इन्फ्लेशन. हाउ डज दिस इन्फ्लेशन बिकम 10%? वेल, एट लीस्ट 5% और अ पार्ट ऑफ इट कम्स फ्रॉम depreciation of INR INR itself. The rest is the general price rise in the Indian economy. So therefore, ये 10% के आसपास तो बहुत आराम से आता है. Now, on a long-term basis, if you are stuck with investments where the returns are only 8%, inflation for you is 10%, then it leads to what? Well, it leads to erosion of wealth. The next impact of a falling INR is that it leads to greater exports. Theoretically speaking, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Now, again, it's very simple that, for example, if let's say that I am an American, I am sitting in America and I am importing or I am buying things from Indian market. Let's say that, what am I buying? Let's say that I am buying this pen from India, which is getting manufactured. Now, in 2024, the price of this pen is 100 rupees. By next year, the price remains the same, but because INR depreciates, then this pen has become cheaper for me to buy because I am sitting in US, okay? So technically what should happen is that our exports should rise. But is this really happening? So for this, let us check the actual macro data. So you can take a look at this entire picture in the last 5 years and you will see कि यार कुछ de facto खास फर्क पड़ा नहीं है in terms of what we are exporting. So our exports haven't gone up dramatically over the last 3-4 years. In that time frame, INR has depreciated quite aggressively. But this is not reflecting in terms of higher exports. Now, why is that happening? Because हमारा logical sense क्या होता है कि everything competes on price. कि चीज़ सस्ती कर देंगे तो we will be able to export more. It doesn't work that way. It also comes down to quality of the product, what kind of products you are exporting, what is the strength or competitiveness that you have. For example, this is the Xiaomi and BYD cars, right? EVs that is being manufactured out of China. Now, demand for these type of cars is picking up like crazy, okay? But in India, name one car that we are exporting at a global level, which is competing against Tesla or Xiaomi or BYD, etc. There is nothing, right? So this is the direction in which the world is moving, but we are unable to figure out our competitive strength. Just price cutting can only work to a point. So yes, de facto, the depreciation of currency should lead to higher exports, but it's not happening. So then comes the next very interesting point that with the depreciation of rupees, even the buying power of the government falls. Now, why does that happening? So earlier I had explained the point regarding the erosion of savings. Now, even our governments have a certain amount of savings, which are called as reserves, right? So reserves means क्या? कि for example, सरकार के पास कितना पैसा पड़ा हुआ है? So सरकार also has a locker. And they have gold in it, they have USD in it, they have Forex in it, right? And these are all the government reserves, right? Now, every year government needs to expense some money, right? In terms of building infrastructure, whatnot, right? It makes certain revenues also. Now, if overall the INR is depreciating by, let's say 5%, then what is happening? Even the buying power of government or the spending power of government is coming down, right? This is a problem. Now, what would the government do? Well, government, what it would simply do is that it will try to increase its revenue. For example, अगर उनकी buying power, जो भी उनके पास चिट्ठा था, right, पड़ा हुआ लॉकर में, right, if the value of it gets eroded by 5%, what will government do? Well, government will come and tax you. कि यार चलो ठीक है, भाड़ा में जानते मेरी buying power. I'll anyways make more money by increasing the taxes. So the increase in taxes also can be attributed, or a part of it can be attributed due to the fact that INR is depreciating really fast. Now, many a times the government will not tell you that, you know what, boss, INR is depreciating, citizens, now you start paying like more money for my expenses. They're not going to do that. There is something called as hidden taxes. Now, what are hidden taxes? For example, remittance charges. How many of you understand that if you're remitting money from India to US or Canada, or from Canada to an Indian bank account, there are remittance charges that are there, right? HDFC कुछ आपसे charge करेगा. Currency conversion charges में आपको निपटाया जाता है, right? So all those are hidden charges that are imposed on you in order to do all this recovery. In fact, in 2024 budget, there was a concept that was introduced about 20% TCS. If you are remitting your money from India to anywhere outside, if the amount of money that you are transferring is more than 7 lakhs. खुद सोच के देखो कि this is already your taxed money on which you have already paid taxes. It is sitting in your account. You want to buy like some, let's say, US stocks, okay? And so, well, if you are buying more than 7 lakhs of US stocks, then you have to pay a 20% TCS. Now that will get refunded to you at the year end, but a large capital gets blocked. If you're buying any international real estate, then again, if you have to make that transfer from India to, let's say, Dubai, then it becomes a problem for you कि आप पे 20% TCS लगाया जाता है. Now many people in the comment section will say कि अच्छा तो बहुत ही अच्छा मूव है, दिस दैट स्टफ। भाई इसको आप साइकोलॉजिकली सोचो, इसको आप फ्रीडम के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सोचो, दिस इज ऑलरेडी योर टैक्स मनी, राइट? व्हाई आर यू बीइंग मेड टू पे एडिशनल 20% TCS? मेक्स नो सेंस, बट दीज आर ऑल हिडन कॉस्ट ऑफ अ फॉलिंग INR. देन कम्स द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट विच डायरेक्टली impacts you, because many of you would be thinking कि अच्छा बहुत सारे मुझे स्टॉक्स में भी इन्वेस्ट नहीं करना, आई डोंट वांट टू रेमिट माई मनी, आई एम गोइंग टू लिव इन इंडिया, मुझे क्या फर्क पड़ता है अमेरिकन के लिए सस्ता पड़े महंगा पड़े, मुझ पे कैसे फर्क पड़ता है? ओके, सो दिस इज पॉइंट नंबर 9. Whenever INR depreciates, there is inflation of hard assets in India. Over the last 3 years, 3.5, 4 years, the property values in India have gone up like crazy. Now, why is that happening? Multiple reasons, but one of the core reasons is that, see, for an American buying a property in India, for example, if there's an NRI sitting in Canada, America, Dubai, wherever, dirhams is not falling compared to INR, it is actually getting strengthened. Okay. USD is not falling, it is getting strengthened. So to an American NRI or a Dubai based NRI, things are getting cheaper to buy in India. But for an Indian sitting in India looking to buy a house in Bangalore, are things getting cheaper for you? Absolutely not. Every year you're losing 5% compared to an American or a Dubai based person. Okay. Now what does that do? Well, you're looking to buy that same house. A Dubai based NRI or an American based NRI might be buying that same house in Bangalore. Now they can outbid you. Why? Because for them things are getting cheaper in India by 5%. But for you, it's actually a loss. So to cut the long story short, if you are an Indian who has got nothing to do with outside India, but you are in the process of acquiring some hard assets like real estate, land, flat, whatever, then in that circumstance, you have to compete with an outsider for that same asset. And if INR is getting weakened, it reduces your buying power and it becomes a problem for you. So then comes the next and final point that, okay, fine, ये सारी दिक्कतें हैं, तो then what is it that we can do and what is it or what is the solution towards which the government is working? Well, to cut the long story short and going to the initial point that I was explaining, that in order to arrest the fall of rupee, the first key change that the Indian government needs to do is that it needs to increase the demand of INR. Now, in the last 1.5 years, Indian government has been trying really hard to increase the demand of INR by building something called as rupee trade settlement system, where the idea is that you go to countries like Russia, you tell them that, you know what, boss, we both trade with each other. So how about rather than taking refuge in US dollar, how about we trade in our local currencies? So this is what India tried to do via rupee settlement system. But unfortunately, that system was killed after a few months, because once Russia took some money or stored some money in INR format, they could not find any external use except for trading with India. So that limited their ability, right? So therefore, the system was killed. But in the future, I'm sure that, government will try more in order to pump up this system, and it becomes really imperative. One variant of this system is BRICS currency. So BRICS currencies or BRIC nation have come together. They are trying to formulate a currency. Donald Trump has recently issued a warning कि भाई आप लोगों ने चेंचे करा तो राइट में आपको बैन कर देंगे, right, and what not, right? So America is not going to let these type of currencies flourish. And the inherent problem with BRICS currency is that who will take the dominant lead? Because fine, BRICS nation would do away with the US dollar, whatever. But which currency within the BRICS bloc would you prefer? So that's a question to be debated on. BRICS has been in power for a while now. It's not as if that this is something new. They are trying to counter the existing monetary system, but this is a difficult thing to execute, because who do you give power to? So this problem is unlikely to get solved practically over the next few years. So then comes the final point that, acha, fine, right, what is it that I can do? Well, what you can do is, number one, if you're buying hard assets, try to buy hard assets in India. This is going to be useful. It somewhat acts as a hedge against like fast depreciation of currency. For example, gold, for example, Bitcoin, for example, land, or limited supply real estate. All these are viable options that you could consider. On top of that, explore high growth assets. For example, stock markets is a high growth asset. Here, if the currency is depreciating by 5%, your wealth might be growing at 12-13%. So there is a sensible alpha post tax. Third and finally, if you have the option of earning in US dollars or having an offshore bank account, all these are viable options that you could consider. Finally, definitely do go and check out Vested. It's a wonderful platform for stock investing in the US. If you want to lock certain wealth in US stocks, then you could definitely consider Vested.